Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. My name is Jackson Mummy, and each week we'll be bringing you updated information about the bar exam and what you need to do in order to make the next bar exam your last bar exam. Ready to get started? Let's jump to it. Everybody, welcome. Today is Wednesday, November 30th. It's the end of November. June is with me today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing pretty well here. I'm in the cold, snowy weather in Colorado, and it was 4 inches of snow yesterday, and then today it's like 5 degrees. So I don't know.
Totally jealous. I'm cold. I'm that cold, but I don't have any snow. I want snow.
We got plenty here. For all of you who are joining us, we're glad to have you with us. If you are watching on the replay, again, glad to have you with us. And certainly if you are listening or watching as the podcast, glad to have you as part of our audience. We are today going to sum up and talk a little bit about the July 2022 exams. All of those results are now in the books. We are obviously pointing ahead to the upcoming exams in February 2023. We're going to take some student questions, both in terms of study strategy, and we'll do one or two substantive questions. And because we're in the holidays and this is a stressful time, I think, for a lot of bar takers, just because you're trying to multitask, you're trying to deal with your family and the holidays and all the expectations that come with that and study for the bar exam, particularly if you're taking the February test. And I know that for a lot of people, that's chaotic. And so one of the things that we have done, we added last year, was a series of one-on-one coaching sessions with June, our mindset coach, that you could add to your course. We call it Calming the Chaos. June, you could probably talk about this at great length, but if you could just briefly explain what Calming the Chaos is, because I think it's a really useful program anytime, but particularly this time of the year.
Absolutely. It's basically one-to-one coaching with me. You get 4 30-minute calls that you can use anytime between now and the day up to your exam. And what we use the time for is group coaching is great, but I can't really dive deep with you, especially if it's major overwhelm or anxiety or fear that is stopping you from passing the bar. And Jackson knows this. I believe 80% of passing the bar is your mindset. How you prepare and walk into that exam with your head and your mind is how you're going to do on that exam. So it's super, super important. And like I said, it's one-to-one coaching with me. I do exercises. It's nothing crazy though. It's not like you got more homework or I'm going to give you more anything crazy to do, but it's really just to get you in a mindset to study better so that you don't have to make studying so painful. We actually can make it fun and you retain it and you get it. So we'll work on that. We'll work on your fears and anxieties and what's holding you back. Because believe it or not, the luggage we carry from exam to exam weighs us down. And I can help you get rid of the luggage. There's a lot of things we can do together that we cannot do one on a group coaching call. So if you need that extra help or feel like you just need that accountability partner, someone to talk to, because I will hold you accountable. Because while they call me the fairy godmother and I'm very loving, I'm also very realistic on why you aren't getting what you really want. And I can help you get it. I come to this with a lot of life experience, as Jackson can attest to. And really, a part of my joy is seeing students who coach with me then go on to pass the bar like Amanda. If you feel called to do it, then I'll post the link. And if not, at least join a group coaching call. Don't do this alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you very much, June. And I encourage everybody to check out that program. It's well worth it. Let me transition now to talk just a little bit about what happened in July of 2022. We now have all of those results in, and it certainly wasn't a surprise. The results across the board, most of the country, the results went down from July of 2021 to July of 2022. And we want to be able to sort of correlate exam dates because you obviously have a different cohort of bar takers in July than you do in February. But 31 jurisdictions, including 5 of the largest jurisdictions, saw their first-time pass taker rate decline. The same is true for the repeat bar taker rate. The numbers for repeat bar takers tended to be around 20% in most of the major jurisdictions. Now, in California, Texas, Florida, we saw a decrease in both first time and in repeat bar taker pass rates from July to July. The only exception, weirdly enough, was New York, which saw a very small increase in first time pass rates from one year to the next. I suspect that's more a factor of that New York had held out during COVID and not allowed a lot of repeat bar takers to sit for their exam. They had a flood of those people come in last July of 2021. And so that deflated their pass rate a bit. And then in July of 2022, the pass rate went up. Generally speaking, the pass rate for first time takers was somewhere in the 70 percentile range in most of those major jurisdictions, but the repeat bar taker pass rate again was about 20%. Now, when we look at the statistics for the multi-state exam, it was virtually even. In July of 2021, the mean was 140.4 scaled. In July of 2022 was 140.3. So virtually the same. And the real point about this, the thing that's getting most of the attention, is that the July 2021 exams were given online in a number of jurisdictions. And of course, the July 2022 was given only in person. And there's a lot of discussion about why pass rates are going down. I find it fascinating. The big box bar reviews have jumped out there to say that's because law schools gave their exams as open books during COVID. And so so applicants had very little exposure to a closed book exam. Oh, come on. If you're in a course and you've been studying and you've been doing the practice exams, then you've been doing them as closed book and it shouldn't make much of a difference. I think the reality is that a lot of people taking the big box bar reviews never get to that point in the study. And so for that group, maybe they never have taken a closed book exam. I don't know. I suppose it's possible. But in our course, we know that's not the case. But I thought that was an interesting justification. The other interesting point that was made where pass rates decreased, the average cut score was 270. But in the jurisdictions where the pass rate went up just slightly, the average cut score was 265. That's a duh statement. If the cut rate is lower, you're probably going to get an increase in passing scores. But the other interesting extrapolation of this that was made was that people who failed probably failed by just a very narrow margin. Wow. Doesn't matter if you fail by 1 point or by 10 or 20, you still failed. But I guess that's the justification. They also, a lot of finger pointing at the applicants saying applicants aren't good with time tests. They're not good at memorizing. Really? This is just occurring to folks that memorization may not be the way to learn and study, and that if you don't practice, it's going to be a problem for you. I don't know what that tells us. We're not a great deal. The NCBE, the bar examiners, are looking at the efficacy of these different ways of taking the test online versus in person. Obviously, in 2025 or 2026, they're going to the new bar exam. That won't affect any of you here, hopefully today, but that may be an online test. We don't know yet. And the NCBE is trying to figure that out and see what difference that makes. And of course, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not online law schools are good. I don't know. The pass rates are the pass rates. So I think that the reality here is that if you're just doing the same old thing, you probably weren't very successful, particularly if you're a repeat bar taker. So doing things differently becomes absolutely critical. And is the exam tough? Yes. Is the exam getting tougher? These numbers would tell you just slightly tougher, but we're seeing the trends that we've seen for now several years, pre-COVID, through COVID, and now post-COVID, if this is post-COVID. And I would expect February 2023, we're going to have a lot of repeat bar takers out in the world. We should see, again, pretty difficult pass rates. And I would expect repeat bar taker rates probably will continue to be in that 20 percentile range, but you don't have to live with that 20%. Just recognize that if you're doing something different, and we hope that you are because you're in our course, that you've got a much better than 20% chance of passing. So that's what we want you to keep in mind as we talk about those rates. All right. What I want to do at this point is jump into some student questions that we got, and then we will go from there. All right, let's jump into the administrative questions. The first one, the student said, I can only pay for one additional item. And I want to know, do you recommend mind maps or photo reading for that? By mind maps, I think they were talking about bar maps. My recommendation would be photo reading. And the reason I say photo reading is that it really is foundational to almost everything that you would be doing. You're going to be able to read your outlines faster. You're going to retain more information. You're going to be able to use that information to write better essays, to answer MBEs, to do your performance tests. Now, we offer photo reading in two different formats. You can just purchase the photo reading for the bar exam course. I think that price is roughly $400. Or you can buy the virtual boot camp, which includes photo reading and has all of the application pieces of how to use photo reading for essay writing, for performance tests, for MBEs, plus a bunch of other information. And so you're getting all of that wrapped in, and that's $800. And you can actually stretch those payments out over several months. A number of people have asked, can they pay for photo reading over a period of time? The way to do it is by ordering the virtual boot camp. Now, if you are already a photo reader and you would like to have access to all of those boot camp materials that we used in our most recent boot camp, you will get a credit of $400 because you're a photo reader. So there you go. So it will cost you $400 to get access to a lot of information in the online virtual boot camp. Next question. The student says, am I locked into making the installment payments? Meaning, can I pay the bill in full before the end of the installment date? The answer is yes, you can do that. It will be prorated. If you wait 11 months and then tell us you want to pay it in full, you're not going to get much of a discount. But if you do that early on, you'll get a fairly substantial discount. So you always have that option. Just reach out, send an email to June, and we will take care of that for you and show you how to do that. Next, my student said, I wanted to know if I add on the one-on-one coaching or I add photo reading to my plan, can I make payments on those things? The answer is yes. If you add coaching, you can pay for that over a 12-month period. That's an upgrade. And if you want to add photo reading, again, you can pay for it through the virtual boot camp over, I think it's an 8-month period. Or if you just want photo reading by itself, you can put that into 2 payments. Again, just reach out and let us know, but lots of ways to do that. Now, we did get some questions about people wanting to upgrade to one-on-one coaching with me. A couple of comments about that. The first is, this is the time to do it. As we transition into December, you are going to want to have that coaching, I think, for December, January, and February, if you're a February bar taker. So 90 days worth of coaching. And I would suggest that you go ahead and order that and get started right away. My schedule is more open in December than it gets in January and February. Now, you're going to be able to talk to me and no one will have a problem getting through regardless, but it's just easier. You're going to have more choices in terms of the scheduling if you start now. The other advantage, of course, is that you start getting the feedback earlier, so you can start incorporating it into your work and making it really build on itself. So I would encourage you, if you're thinking about that coaching, to go ahead and do it. I've had some questions about how the coaching is done. It is one-on-one Zoom calls, half an hour in length, roughly. Sometimes I go a bit over. We record them so you can go back and review them. And typically what happens is you send me your work, we throw it up on the screen, we talk about it, and that's the way to get the feedback. I had a student contact me yesterday who said, well, I really want feedback on my essays. Do you give written feedback? And the answer is we don't do written feedback because it doesn't work. It's just not very effective. Most of you got written feedback when you were in school. Maybe you got it in your previous bar review courses, and it's not very valuable to most people. What I discovered a long time ago when I was preparing students at Georgetown was that we really learn better in a writing conference. Talking about the writing, engaging in an interactive discussion is by far more productive. Now, if you can't do the one-on-one coaching with me, I will tell you that the course has everything that you need in order to write successfully, whether it's essays or performance tests. But if you want the feedback on your work, this is really the best way to do it. I do offer a personal writing workshop now, which is a 2-session piece, which is built primarily on the mechanics of writing. I would not recommend that if you want a lot of feedback on your work, because obviously in 2 sessions, that isn't going to happen. But if you just want the mechanics of how to write, if you want me to explain literally what's in the course, personal writing workshop is one of those possibilities. But if you want the feedback, the 8-call or 12-call package is what I would recommend. I would add it now, and then you can spread those payments out if you wish over a 12-month period, or you can receive a fairly substantial discount by paying front. Next student question said, I've already finished reviewing several subjects with a previous bar exam company. I switched to your course and I see that you start with criminal law. Should I go back and do that again when I've already done it before? Is it a waste of time to redo it? We have a fair number of students that come to us from other courses and may have already started in and done some of the subjects. I don't think it's ever a waste of time to hear a different take on the subject. And I would encourage you to go ahead and start in our course and follow it in the order that you see it in your online course platform. Now, you always have the flexibility to switch and jump around if you want. Problem is when you start jumping around, there's a possibility that you'll miss things or skip things. So I would encourage you to not do that. But if you already study a subject and you get to ours, you can speed up the lectures, you can photo read the outlines. There's a lot of things you can do. I would spend some time trying to mind map or take your notes in a mind map format to bring all of that material together. I think that would be helpful for you. That's what I would suggest to this student or any student that's coming to us from another course. Go ahead and start at the beginning. I think you'll find it works well and effectively. All right. A student wrote and said, I took some MBE practice questions and I got 11 or 10 correct out of 25 questions, and said, I'm doing all the reading, I'm listening to the lectures, I'm doing my homework, but I'm a bit discouraged. And I think that's a pretty common response, is to feel discouraged because you're not getting as many questions right as you think you should. The reality, however, is quite different. It doesn't matter how many of these first 100 questions in each subject you get correct. I've seen students get 2 or 3 correct out of 25 and they pass the exam. I've seen students that get 18 or 19 correct at this point and they fail the exam. There's no correlation that we've ever been able to determine over 25 plus years in that regard. So why do we give you the questions? We do it because it's really a great way to help you learn the material. Remember that the course is designed on the idea of repetition. So we start with the reading and then we repeat that with the video lectures so that we're repeating actually within that. You're hearing the lecturer and you're seeing the text. And then we add a third leg, which is the question practice. And then we repeat that question practice over time. So if you're getting a few questions wrong or many questions wrong, doesn't really matter as long as you're learning from what you're doing and mind mapping or taking notes on the answer explanation. So I would just say it's way too early for anybody to be discouraged. I don't care how badly you think things are going. It just doesn't matter at 90 days out. The goal here is to get better. So don't assume that because your performance today is at any particular level, that's going to remain static from now until the exam. It hardly ever does. I would just tell this student or anybody else to just relax. You'll be fine. Just keep working and you'll see your scores go up. Particularly if you're a photo reader, you really see a jump as you begin to build the layers on of the repetition.
Accent, since you mentioned photo reading, David wants to know if you can talk a little bit about how photo reading changes your entire study game and how it even affects or goes into other components of your life. And David finds that it works so well. So wanted to know if you can talk about that.
Yeah. Photo reading is a game changer for the bar. It's a game changer in life too. But what photo reading does is that it gives you this ability to go through this material at such a fast speed that you're able to do it hundreds of times. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Most of our photo readers will tell me that they have photo read each subject outline 50, 100 plus times. They lose count after that. And of course, when you've got that many repetition cycles of the material, it's going to make a huge difference for you. Within the boot camp and the virtual boot camp, we train you in how to use photo reading for essay writing, specifically how to use photo reading with selective intuition on your MBEs and how to use it for performance tests. It makes a big difference, and it's useful for people who are photo readers to begin to get that sense of how it all works. I think that what it does in terms of changing your study is that it puts you fewer hours in reading and much more time in your note taking, your mind mapping, and in your repetition. I think that what a lot of people who are photo readers discover is that it just impacts your ability to absorb material about everything. You may find you have more vivid dreams. You may find that you are suddenly remembering things around this material that you don't know why you knew it. And so it really creates this cascading sense of success. Now, I had somebody say to me that they were struggling a bit with their photo reading, and the student said, I've been going through that several times in order to understand and process all the information. I was concerned, however, that maybe I should do the photo reading sessions after I study and then come back to photo reading. And the answer to that is no. Photo reading is foundational. Photo reading will take you 8 hours to learn at most. That's an hour a day for 8 days. And you don't stop your studying while you're photo reading. You do them concurrently. So it's an hour a day of photo reading, and then you're doing your bar study. And most people are able to transition into photo reading their bar materials within maybe 3 or 4 lessons. As many of you have experienced who are photo readers, it doesn't happen right away. It doesn't happen on day one. And the proficiency comes with practice and staying with it and playing with it. I would encourage you again to stay with it, keep going, even if you don't feel satisfied, and you probably won't as you start as a photo reader, because it's not satisfying to the conscious brain at all. It is all going to the non-conscious. And then you bring it out of the non-conscious by activation with the lectures, the question practice, and your note taking. So it's actually pretty simple, and it's logical when you think about it. Lots of times people get discouraged early on, and then after they've been doing it for a while, if they stay with it, they're like, oh my gosh, this changes everything. So thanks for the question. And thank you for the questions we got from students earlier in the week. All right. Another question. When should I add one-on-one sessions? You should add them now. This would be my recommendation. And they said, is there a timeline on how I should be pacing myself through the material? Which is a great question. I think at this stage in this time of the year, coming into December, I would be looking at 20 to 25 hours a week of study. Now, it doesn't really matter how you allocate those hours, but I wouldn't allocate more than 3 hours of a session, then taking a break. And I would not advocate for more than 6 hours in a day. So we get a little bit closer. Some of you may need to go to 8 or 9 hours a day. We're going to try and avoid that if we can. And the best way to avoid it is by getting started now and staying at that 20 to 25 hours a week. If you're doing it in the mornings, or you're doing at lunchtime an hour, or you're doing some time after work, I certainly talk to students that do all of that. And that's great. And I have a lot of people that take their days off whenever those occur, and they do 3 hours in the morning of that day, and then a break, and then 3 hours in the afternoon. You can get a lot of studying in by doing it that way. We still have plenty of time. I know that for some of you, you feel like now was, particularly when we hit December, oh my gosh, the exam is here. It wasn't here before, but now it's here. Really, 90 days is still a pretty long time in the bar, and don't let that throw you. Just continue to work and follow the order that you see in the assignments. And if you're really struggling with this question of how to allocate your time, two resources. The first is there's group coaching calls. These are a great place to come and talk about with other students about where you are, how many hours a week you're studying. It's great for encouragement and for accountability. So you heard June talking about the group coaching calls. Please avail yourselves of those. The other resource is a one-on-one coaching call with one of our coaches, Brianna, and it's called the Time Management Workshop. Brianna actually will work with you to develop your own personal schedule. Is a ninja at this, and it's one of the most valuable half hours I think you can purchase to help her get your schedule set up. Everybody that's been through it, as far as I know, has come back and gone, wow, that was just incredible and helpful. I'd love to have you do that. Next question I've got is a different question, but we get it just about every season. A student said, does your course qualify for CLE credits, and do you issue certificates? The answer is no and no. We don't qualify for CLE in most places. There may be a few places that maybe you could try and push for it, but because it's so cumbersome, we have never provided certificates. We're not in the CLE business. And so I would not encourage any of you to try and apply for CLE credit for your bar study. In general, most CLE programs say bar study is not eligible. Don't ask me why. It's just their decision that they've made. Next question, are group coaching calls recorded? No, they're not recorded because people are talking about some very personal things, and we try to keep that privacy intact. And so we do not permit recording of those calls. However, what we do is we have group coaching calls on different days and at different times of the day. Again, I was talking to a student yesterday who said, I can't get to group coaching calls because I work. And I said, really? You work on Sunday? No. So we've got a group coaching call on Sunday. You can get to that one. You work at 8:30 or 9 at night? No. We've got a call at that hour. So there's lots of opportunities here. And as we get closer to the exam, if necessary, we're always looking to add to our group coaching rosters. So we're going to make sure that we're paying attention here. Typically, we like to stay at about 10 to 15 students in a group coaching call. So again, if you haven't done one, jump on it. They're great. And we would love to have you there with our group coaches. Next question, a student said that they were talking about in our online course, we've got a bank of 800 random mixed MBE questions. And the student said, if I do some and then I close out at this and then I go back to it, it takes me back to the first question and it appears I haven't answered any of them. That's correct. It is a totally randomized product, those 800 questions. And they're really not there for you to do all 800 of them. And the student said, how should I be using this resource? The answer is you shouldn't be using the 800 mixed questions yet. That's something that we would recommend that you do probably if you're a February bar taker around February 10th from that date until the exam, just for good review. And that's really all it is. It's not trying to keep track of how you're doing. And you might see some of the same questions again in that question bank, but that's when you would want to use it. So for right now, no real reason to be using that particular question bank. You've got all of your questions by subject. You'll do all of those, then you'll do full length tests. Then this randomizing is really at the end just to keep you sharp. So thanks for asking. Next question. I'm following the course schedule step by step. I've been able to put in some hours, but time is flying. I'll start with 2 hours in the morning before I go to work and 2 hours after work. Will that be acceptable? And the answer is sure. If you want to do that's 4 hours a day, 5 times 7 days, it's 28 hours. So that would be great if you want to do that. I suspect that it won't always go that way, but don't be too rigid about your hours. Just keep moving forward. Or if you're a Nemo fan, just keep swimming and you'll be fine. You'll get through all of this. So I know it feels a little scary. And the student that wrote to me today was like, oh my God, suddenly it's December 1st. Yeah, there is something about that. And June and I were talking about before we went live today. There's just something about when the clock turns over into December, people suddenly get very serious about this and it becomes very real to them. If you're having that experience right now, you're not alone by any means. It is fairly common. Next question. Weekends are allowing me to practice your writing style. And my brain is trying to switch over from the IRAC writing to the style that you are teaching. And the student is apparently using the model answers. And they said, my first essay was a disaster after I reviewed the model answer, but then I did better as I started to write. And that's typical of what happens. These first few essays are going to be challenging, particularly if you come out of IRAC writing and you're going to the FLA writing style. It's going to take you a bit of time. That's why we think the personal writing workshop could be helpful if you're struggling with the format and the mechanics. And if you want to talk about the substance and get feedback, then obviously the one-on-one coaching with me would be useful for you to have. The other comment that this particular student made is that they got into the first of the performance tests and they said, wow, time is really a problem. Yeah, it's why you want to be really careful and follow the instructions I've laid out in the for performance tests so that you understand how to allocate your time. Now, if you're a photo reader, there's some additional tools that you've got. And again, I would encourage you to look at virtual bootcamp, or if you just want the webinar on photo reading and performance tests, you can purchase that separately as well. I would say when you're doing your writing, make sure you're uninterrupted for the 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour that your essay requires in your jurisdiction. And if you're doing a performance test, you absolutely have to give yourself an uninterrupted 90 minutes. Starting and stopping during a performance test really wipes out the value of doing it for practice. So make sure that you are not falling into that trap. I think those are all of the general administrative questions. I'm going to wrap up with just two quick substantive questions. We have a student that got into property essays and questions and asked a couple of good property questions. Why is it always property, man? And so I want to just take a quick stab at answering those. And since we had a couple of minutes here left, the first question, and these are not state specific, really, they're just real property questions. They're asking about recording a deed. And they're talking about seeing several essays in which the problem is that the clerk, not the grantee, fails to properly record the deed. We see that fact pattern all the time. The clerk of the court misplaces the deed, or they fail to enter it properly, or they just mangle it, whatever it might be, but typically they lose it. So the question that was asked is, does the grantee get any protection from subsequent transfers? Now, what we can tell you about this is across the board, we know that these at the registry of deeds can misindex or fail to index a properly recorded instrument. The problem that we run into, and the reason this gave our student a problem, is that case law is split about whether or not a subsequent bona fide purchaser, and remember you have to have a bona fide purchaser, but subsequent purchaser can claim the property free of an improperly indexed instrument. The important thing to keep in mind here, you will not see this fact pattern, I don't think, on an MBE, unless you get a very specific set of answer choices that keep you out of this conundrum. There is no universal rule here. It is a split in jurisdictions and a split in courts. Those courts that have held for the subsequent purchaser use the following analysis. They say that even with great diligence, if you can't find the instrument, the prior purchaser could have followed up to make sure that their conveyance was properly indexed. What they're saying, in effect, is that the subsequent purchaser said, I couldn't find the indexed document, but the prior purchaser should have followed up to make sure that it was properly indexed. So that's one holding. Then those that hold for the prior grantee that say, hey, the grantee should get it, would say that grantee met their obligation. They did what they were supposed to do. They went and they tried to record correctly, and they're entitled to the protection of the recording statute. It's not their fault that the clerk didn't do their job. That is the reasoning there. What you want to do if you're on an essay is to say courts are split about this, and here's the reasoning. And so if the court holds for the subsequent purchaser, here's why. If they hold for the grantee, here's why. But I would say this, no matter which way you would come out, and I don't think the examiners would hold it against you one way or the other, you want to make sure that you point out that the losing party in this situation has an action in negligence against the recorder. That is, that the clerk or the governmental agency was negligent because they didn't record properly. And I think that's really what you want to point out. Doesn't matter which way you come out on this one. It's just understanding that the courts are split. So it's a great thing to pick up. And I wish I could say to you, it's always one or the other, but it's not. And that's how it goes. And then our last property question was a little more complicated. I was trying to figure out how I could talk about this, but it comes out of an essay in which we have a grantor who is conveying part of their property to a second party, and they're granting it in fee simple. But then there's language in the grant that says that the grantor reserves and accepts out of the premises for themselves, their heirs, and their assigns a 4-acre grove in the southwest quarter of the property in which point fruit is presently grown. Is that a thing? Is there such a thing? I don't know. Anyway, it says for so long as the said 4 acres are used for the purpose of growing point fruit. Okay. So that's basically it. There's a discussion of conveyance is subject to an easement to reserve and remove soil for point fruit fertilizer. Now, what the student wrote, which I thought was really interesting, is they said, I'm trying to establish the interest created by this deed. And it feels like the grantor has a fee simple determinable in this property and that the grantee has a reversionary interest. I don't know if I'm right, and I can't explain why. Yeah, I understand the problem. Reality here is that a future interest is going to be reversionary if it's retained by the grantor at the time they conveyed the prior estates. So it's a reversionary future interest, and I would say that's the correct analysis of the problem. I wouldn't try to go too far and too deeply here. It is not a rule against perpetuities problem at all. And because the property is reserved to the grantor and their heirs and assigns for so long as, and that language for so long as is what I think really turns it into the situation that we have a fee simple determinable with a reversionary interest. And I think that's what we would be dealing with. Don't make it too complicated. If you see for so long as, probably a reversionary interest, and I'm not sure you got to do a whole lot more than that. All right. I hope that's helpful. Just give you a little bit of property law there to thrill and excite you. I think that's all I've got for today. I hope everybody's having a good study week as we turn into December. It gets real. It gets very real for people. And if you've been following me on Facebook, I've been doing these daily reels and TikToks, 60-second messages about 40-day journey to bar exam success. I encourage you to check that out on our Facebook page. Really what I've been talking about in those is just that you got to take it a step at a time, a day at a time. And that's really what it's about right now. Don't freak out. Just keep working, keep moving. I think based on my emails, the ones that I'm seeing, our group coaches are seeing, June's seeing, I think people are doing well. I think they're engaged and starting their studies and getting pretty serious about it. We will see you in a couple of weeks. We'll be back, do group coaching and one-on-one coaching and all the other stuff. And we just want to invite you to stay in the process. Don't freak out. Don't lose your mind. Don't get caught up in the holidays and say, I'll start studying after New Year's. That would be a mistake. Study now. Everything you get done in December, you will love what December you did. I think that's it. It's been good seeing all of you. Thanks for being here. Hope you all have a great week. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. and keep at it, keep studying, and have a great day. Take care, everybody.